and also double checking to make sure it's doing what you want it to do, that it's not wiggling, deviating off its line, or doing anything strange. So now when we go to number 11, we're going to start to separate the ball away a little bit further. So we see the overlap part of the ball is becoming less as it reaches its high point here. And then we go into number 1, which is now our highest point, so we can decide where do we want to put the ball. What we could do is we could take the ball and just have it touching, just kissing on that surface there to pull it away. Let's just shift it to make sure that it stays the same size. So this is just the natural progression as you flip the drawings and do the animation, one drawing after the other. It just naturally progresses to this is the position that it would be in. So back to the beginning of the lecture when I said, what would drawing number 1, what would the ball look like? My first assumption, okay, even though I've done this over and over and over again, it's like every year I forget, what the drawing number 1 drawing is going to look like, sort of, but I know. My first assumption would be, well, it's a little bit squished because the action is that the ball is moving up and then it decreases its speed to the stop point, so therefore the top ball is going to be compressed on it just a little bit. But that wouldn't work with the action that we've just created from the movements that we know that it's going to do. So we have to follow through with a progression all the way through to the very end. If we don't, then it starts deviating off and doing something that we don't necessarily want it to do. So this way we're constantly in control. So now when we go to drawing number 2, this is where this ball is dropping. And here's now where we can do a little bit of fun stuff with it. This is drawing number 1 where the ball has reached its high point. We don't want this top ball to reach its high point though, right? Because overlapping action means that not everything happens at the same time. If we have both balls reach their high point at the same time, they're not overlapping. So what we want to do is we want to take this top ball a little bit further, so we're going to start to stretch it and push it a little bit further beyond. So the top part of the ball is going to go a little bit higher, so the top one is actually stretching at both the top and the bottom. So we get this effect here. And then when we go to drawing number 3, the ball is continuing to progress down, our primary ball. So here's where we can start to make some decisions. Maybe we do want that top part to stick just a little bit. Let's try it and see what happens. Okay. So let's take it so that this high point here stays exactly the same, and we begin to stretch our ball out just a little bit here. It just hangs there. And now, here's where we have to do a formal halfway in between, because we've got to take our drawing number 5 off the bottom of our stack. Because now we're looping our action from number 3 to 4 to 5. So we do have to have number 3 and 5 over top of each other, so that when we do this drawing number 4, it's actually working as a pure in-between. So here's the action that's taking place here between these two drawings. So we've created the pull here. So here's where, again, we get into this instance of, we know we have a halfway position between the bottom balls. Their positions are halfway. But that doesn't necessarily mean that we have to have the other stuff in a halfway position as well. We can decide maybe what we want to do is we want to keep the top part of the ball right there, still stuck at the top, and have it hold in that Wile E. Coyote type feel thing. And then as we go to the next drawing here, that's where it starts to snap down. But this would look kind of weird in that position being from a stretched out position like this, really hyper stretched there, going to that one there seems kind of weird. So you'd go back and you would modify this one by stretching it out a little bit further. Or what we could do is we could start to pull this one gradually away from this high point here and let it slow in and accelerate to this position here. So that means we drop this top line down just ever so slightly like this, but still have it connected and stretching out. So you decide on what you want to do. You know, both are valid, both will work, just so long as you blend it through to the next drawing. So there you can see how both balls are now dropping. This one's getting a little bit more of a stretch on it. This one's dropping just slightly. This one's dropping more, so it's accelerating. And then when we go to this drawing here, you can see that it doesn't quite look right because the next drawing after that was number 6. And remember what we did on number 6? We stretched it out further. So if I put these back here in order with 3 and 4 and 5 and 6 on top, remember we did number 6 stretched out further than this one here. So therefore, if we go from this one, which is stretched out further, to this one, the middle ball is going to flutter on us. So therefore, we have to make the adjustment to number 5 to get it to halfway in between these two drawings here. So it's just a logical progression to say that this is actually moving from one point to another. So my high point of the first ball is here, my low point of the other ball is here. Half the distance between those two would be just, well, I don't want it actually halfway in between because that wouldn't work either, because even if I put this one over top of this one, you can see it still stretches there. And this one stretches as well, just ever so slightly, well, not a huge amount. So I'd want to have these two at least the same length. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to trace it off. I'll line up the bottom edge and just elongate this ball out to here.
Ryan?
Yes?
What about that overlapping with the original ball to create that three-dimensional
Yeah.
effect? Wouldn't that make it look like the ball's sort of lowering itself as it's going down? As opposed to being...
You mean this overlapping here?
Yeah.
Well, that's sort of perspective. We have to have a horizon line within this environment, right? Where our eye level is. So as the ball drops below our horizon line, we're looking down on the ball, so therefore it's going to overlap more, as opposed to when it comes up. Like if you take two balls and put them side by side, put the horizon line right through the middle, the horizon line splits it, and so you've got two balls that are touching right at that point there. Whereas if you put it down below here, you'd have one ball here like this, and the other ball would overlap it like that. If you put it up above, so this one, the top one is overlapping, but if you put it above the horizon line, then the bottom ball is going to overlap on the top ball, right? Okay, so we're just working a little bit of, I didn't say it, but that's the theory behind it. It's a good thing you brought it up. But that's the theory behind it, is that you're getting overlapping perspective on it. So that now creates a better feel to that drop by putting that elongation into it like that. And I can go back and erase that and clean it up later on. So now let's stack up the drawings in order, and you can just leave them off, just pull them off your pegs the way they are. So your bottom drawing is actually going to be number 7, I believe. Yep, there's number 7. Okay, so you can still flip drawings like this and see how they look. This gives you the link up at the top, because if we start off with drawing number 1 on the bottom, we're not going to see the looping action at the top. So by splitting the stack, you see the top action flow through. Now if we put it back in order so that number one is on the bottom, we'll now be able to see the impact point at the bottom in the middle of the loop. So it comes down, there's your impact, and overlapping that part. So in a cycle, that's how you can take a look at either end of the cycle to see whether or not it's doing what it should do. Okay, so that's kind of a cool action that's taking place there. Okay, now what I'm going to do, I'm going to add on a third ball. Okay, We can pretend that this is our character. This is the character's hips. This is the character's chest. Let's add on a head. Okay? But let's not put the head on top of the character's body. Let's put it off to the side a little bit. So once again, let's just go through our animation here, our drawings, and determine what's the best point. So I want my other ball to be basically out here somewhere, just off to the side. Okay? But I don't know exactly what the point of it is going to be here on number 1, because again, it's coming up. I know I want to do some overlap. This is the first time I've done this version of it here, where I've got the 2 balls and the 1 ball off to the side. So it's something brand new. But I still have to think it through as to how I want it to move. So in my mind, I'm thinking that probably the ball will be down here. Okay? Because it's going to be overlapping and dragging. This one has already reached its high point. I want this one to delay, so it's going to be down below. And then when this one starts to drop, I want this one to come up. So I want the action to be like this. Okay? The balls are going to be going like that. I'm just going to be bouncing at a different rate. So this is my guesstimate as to where that head ball is going to be. Right? And we'll see what happens in just a second. So let's go to the drawing that we know, which is number 5. Right? So let's find our drawing number 5 here. There's my drawing number 5. So in this one here, the body is coming down and it's pulling really hard. Now, I'm thinking in my mind that, well, you know what? I still really don't know where the head would go on this one. I can't quite envision it. So I'm going to go to my next drawing. I'm going to go to number 6, where the ball is down at the bottom, because I think in this one, I can pretty much be assured that the ball for the head is going to be probably somewhere up here in the drag. Okay, so that's where I'm going to put the head. And just to vary things up a little bit, it doesn't have to be a circle. I'm going to just change the shape of the cranial mass for the character just to make it interesting. And I'm just sort of going to make it a jelly bean type shape. Like that. Okay. So it's not because it's stretching on the downward action. It's just that's the cranial mass for my character. Right? All your characters are going to have a specific cranial mass and a shape that you're going to create once you do your design. So for me, that's going to be my cranial mass for my character's design. I can stretch that, I can squish it if I want to, but that's what I'm going to start off with. So I may come back to number 6, just as we did previously with number 5, and modify it, because things might change as we go along. All right, so I'm going from number 6 to my drawing number 7. So here's my impact point. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to have that head trail in, and I want to maintain the length, the distance between the two, but maybe just stretch it just a little bit. So here's where the original head shape is. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to alter the path of action. I'm going to pull it in slightly and stretch it just a little bit further. So I'm just going to push it in here. So there's my original one there. I'm just going to shift it in and give it a little bit of a stretch, just a tiny bit. Okay, so my path of action is curling in this way because the drop is causing the head to pull in on an S curve here. So my path of action from the high point will be like this. It's going to come in here, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to hit down on my low point on 7A, hit and then reverse and come back up again. So at this point here, what's going to happen is my head is going to go down and forward here. So it's going to loop in like this, and it's going to come down here. So remember in my thinking, sorry, do you have a question?
Yeah, how do you know where to put the head?
I don't. I'm just guessing. Yeah. I'm just taking a guess and thinking, I wonder if this is going to work. Okay? There is no definitive answer to this because I'm making this up as I go along. All right? It's a piece of animation that I want to create a character. So I'm saying that this is the character's pelvis, this is the character's chest, this is the character's head. Okay? I'm sort of imagining it in my head. as to what the character is going to do. So I'm just making my best guess based on the information that I know in my head and trying to pass it on. But for you guys, I mean, it's an issue of try it, see what happens. Okay? It's not like you're expending a huge amount of energy, and that's part of what animation is all about. It's about exploring, trying things, using the principles, the solid principles that we know, and utilizing them in a way that makes the character move the way we want it to move. Right? So, as I said before, I have never done this before. This is a first-time piece of animation for me. Am I scared? Slightly. I don't want to screw up. Okay? And so that you guys find out, oh, he really is a janitor, and he doesn't actually work here. There's always that initial fear of wondering, I wonder if this is going to work. And then when you shoot it, you make a judgment call. And you say, did this work? And maybe it's a failed experiment and I screwed up and it didn't quite work. Or maybe it's a happy accident and ta-da, it does work. Or maybe it's a controlled, I knew this was going to happen type thing, where it's calculated the whole way through. And we'll get into that later on when we start getting into more complex stuff, where we have to do what are called thumbnail sketches, which actually plan out your action before you actually sit down to animate. So here, I'm just winging it and just hoping that this works. And we'll see, right? So going from this position here, as the head drops, don't forget this is, the action coming down is accelerating because I'm delaying it by 2 drawings. So while the head is dropping here, I want it to start to go faster at this point. So the distance between my previous head, which was here, and this one here, I want it to go faster, so it's going to be popping out to here. So I'm going to put my head down in this position here, and I'm just going to trace back what I'm doing over here. And again, because it's accelerating going down, I'm just going to stretch it just a little bit more again. But I'm going to stretch the top part here more than the bottom part. So it just has a little bit of a pull like this. See how the two are reversing? My body is going up, my chest is going up, my head's going down. That's overlapping action. Okay? They're doing something in the opposite direction where we're going to get this type of an action here, okay? Which is basically a waving action. Okay? It's a form of a wave. If we turn it sideways, it turns into a seaweed, which is one of the main principles that we'll be dealing with in a couple of weeks. So 7A looks like this. Now I go to 8, which is my stretch position here. Stretching, full acceleration on the way back up again. So what I'm going to do here is my head has to be attached to my body by a neck. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to rotate the head here. Like this. My neck is going to be insanely stretched. And I'll show you that later on because we got to connect the two of them together. So here again, roll flipping. If I take the drawings of my fingers here and I roll flip, I can see where it's going. See how it comes down and it just rotates. Okay, so it's stopped at this point here and it's just flipping over. And now I'm going to pull it back up again on the way up. Drawing number 9. So on that pull up, here's where my neck is going to connect right here. I want there to be basically my neck's going to go like this for all intents and purposes. And so that means that my neck's going to be up here. It's going to be like this, pulling and stretching, which means that it's going to pull this part of the head. My head is not going to be facing in this direction up like that. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to get my head to drag. So therefore, my neck's going to be like this. The top of my head's down there. There's my connection point. So I'm doing that. Okay, so it's doing a hard pull on it like this. So then I go to 10. So that's number 4. I'm decelerating with the body. So I'm going to start to pull that head up in this direction here. I'm going to change this curve. So here's the pull on the curve there. I'm going to pull this out a little bit further out here just to loosen it up a little bit, but still have my head dragging down because I now have to follow what's called a path of action. So you'll remember we talked about the gymnasts, female gymnasts with the streamers on the ends of the strings. So when my head comes down here, it's going to this position here. If I drew my neck in, it would go like this. Then to this position here. So the tip of my head is going in this direction around here like this. The bottom part is pulling up in this direction here. So there's my path of action that's being created by that pull. So it sweeps along in this direction here as I go to this next drawing. It's got to sweep through here. And now because this part here is extending out for the length of the neck, my path of action is going to go out in this direction here. So if I back this up, there's the path of action for the tip of the head. It's going up and around like that. It's forming this curl. It goes like that. Okay. So now number 11, I'm starting to pull back up into my high point. I'm going to start to recover my neck up and get my head to start to rotate. Now, there's two different things that I can do here. And I could actually do it with this drawing here. Remember the curvature on the head here? I just back this up. This drawing here. This is the shape of my character's head. Let's say my character had a nose on him. And I'm just going to stick the nose out like this. Okay. I'm just going to use a simple line to represent the nose, but let's say that nose comes around and forms the volume like this. Okay? So we'll just keep it to this one line here. That nose shape is going to have a little bit of a drag to it as it comes down. So as the head drops, the head's going to tilt a little bit and pull. And as I get to this point here, the nose might be dragging a little bit like this. Then here, my nose is going to go around like this. And then when I go to this drawing here, my nose is now here on that side. So now I've got to start to recover my nose back up. In this drawing here, my nose would be here, like that. So my character's head is upside down, right? Okay. So what I could do, if I wanted to, from this drawing to this drawing here, is I could modify that head shape to straighter, like this, to follow my path of action there. So it gets a pull like this. And then when I go to this position here, the curve on the head is going to go in this direction like this because I'm pulling it. So I can actually reverse the curve on the cranial mass and do something like this. But my nose is still going to be here. Okay. So I'm reversing the curve on the head as I pull it up. So now I'm back to drawing number 1. My number 1's on the bottom. So my guess, remember what my guess was for the cranial mass? I'm wrong. That's nowhere near it would be here in this overall flow. See how far off I am here? I had it pulled in there. Where if I follow through with my path of action here, here's my path of action, I've now got to bring it back up to here. So there's where my neck is going to go, and my head would be here. That's where my cranial mass will go there. And my nose will come out like this. So then as I loop through to number 2, I'm going to start to shorten up the length of the neck because I don't want to exaggerate it too much. And again, I can go back and modify this later on. So we'll get to here. I'll start to shorten up the neck a little bit, and I'm going to lose my head. It's going to go off the page here. But I'll tack on a stick-it note to this to make it work later on. So my nose is going to rotate to this position here. And then in number 4, bring my head up, and here's where my head would up in this position here, and my nose will be roughly about there. And let's see if that matches up to what I did. No, I didn't do my number 3, 4, and 5 because remember we started with number 6, so I got to grab those drawings. I found number 4 here, and then to number 5. Here's where I'm on my way down now. The nose up like that. And then when I go to my number 6 drawing, I'm actually going to have to pull the head position. Actually, let me grab number 7 as well. So I'm going to keep pulling those off all the time. So I'm going from 5 to 6. My number 6 doesn't quite match in with the overall flow of where it's popping too quickly. So where I would actually want that to be would probably be more around up here. About that position, and pulling the nose up like this to get more of a drag. That would work better. Then as I go to number 7, I probably want to pull the nose up a little bit higher here, get more of a drag on it. Keep it in roughly about the same position there. Okay, so let's flip these and see what they look like. And we'll all be surprised. So because all my action is taking place way up here, I'm just going to shift my hand. Instead of grabbing it in the middle, which would pinch all my drawings, I'm going to shift it off to the side there and flip sideways here. Oops, missed my last 2 drawings here. Okay, so it's quite an exaggerated bouncing action. And what I could do is I could turn this into a character now. I could make this like a duck trying to land on water, and he just smashes into the water. And he's got this violent reaction with his head. I could put his arms on, flailing his arms, or having them overlap. So that's what I'll do over this week, between this week and next week's class. So I'll turn this into a duck landing on water. And I'll just go over top of the drawing here so it doesn't mess up my pencil test. But and this is just on the fly, I'm just making this up as I go. So let's say my duck character looks something like this. Might look a little bit like Daffy Duck. Of course, I would modify what's going on down here in order for it to fit with what's going on with the body. So I'll do this just as one big mass here. So if I was to draw his arms in, that, and I guess because he's hitting his butt down, there's his tail feathers down. Okay, so he could look something like that when he hits the surface. So that's sort of what I'll do with the character as far as getting him to look like a duck. And I'll finish that up over the week. See. It's Daffy Duck bouncing up and down on his butt. So I left his arms off because we're going to do those next week. Okay, so it's kind of cool that you can take something so simple as what we've just done here and turn it into a character. It's the principle of the stretch and squash, the timing, the bouncing action, the overlapping action, which we can then modify and turn into whatever character we want, right?